Did you know that AT&T once used to be the only telecommunications service available in America for 100 years? And although they are no longer a monopoly, they are still an oligopoly who remains one of the top telecommunications services slash businesses in the world, making almost $250 million last year. And it seems AT&T and their commercials would never go away because they are so powerful. Imagine making a phone call and you can only use AT&T, not T-Mobile, not Sprite. That is what America looked like for 100 years, with every American having to use AT&T for their telecommunication services. This is the same as if we could only use Apple products, no Android. Doesn't matter if you like it or not, that's what you have to live with because that's what a monopoly is. They are the only option. I wrote a finals paper and spent a semester researching AT&T and the history behind them, how they were founded as a monopoly and went through many legal battles, eventually leading them to split up into smaller businesses. My fascination of AT&T has led me back here, writing a speech about them. I will be discussing about AT&T and how they started out as a monopoly but are now an oligopoly today, and one of the largest in the telecommunication industry. I will dive into the history of AT&T when they were first formed and a monopoly. So I'll start from the beginning. Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone in 1876. His father-in-law started the Bell Company shortly after and got a patent for his telephone, so his company was the only company able to use telephone services during that time. In 1910, government regulators made AT&T the sole provider to services in America. This made them a monopoly, and until the 80s, they had little competition because of the monopoly they held. For 100 years, the U.S. government tried to regulate AT&T. In 1913, an antitrust was filed against AT&T. The AT&T president at the time and founder wrote a letter to the Attorney General saying they would stop buying other independent carriers and provide connection and network for independent carriers. The antitrust suit was dropped, but AT&T continued to do what they were doing. Fast forward to 1949, AT&T was charged by DOJ with violations of the Sherman Antitrust Act. This was settled with AT&T being barred from entering the computer industry. And in 1956, AT&T lost another case, Hushaphone versus U.S. AT&T, however, continued to be a monopoly. In 1982, it all came falling down for AT&T, which had monopoly for over 100 years. 8 years before, an antitrust DOJ against AT&T accused them of using their monopoly structure to, quote, engage in predatory behavior through exclusive practices and connection charge price, unquote. This case was settled in 1982 when AT&T had to split up all its original operating companies. 22 Bell operating companies came out from AT&T, which formed into 7 regional operating companies. It also allowed competition to come into the telecommunication industry. The government was finally able to regulate AT&T though. What happened to AT&T after being forced to split up into 22 Bell operating companies, 7 regional operating companies? Following 1982, AT&T no longer controlled or had a strong hold on the telecommunication industry thanks to government regulation. This led to a floodgate of companies emerging in this industry like T-Mobile and Verizon. AT&T was forced to adapt as they are now an oligopoly instead of a monopoly, meaning they have competition. Southwestern Bell Corporation, which was one of the 7 companies that AT&T was forced to split up, acquired AT&T for $17 billion. Following 1982 to 2005, AT&T was not able to provide short-distance phone service, where their sister company, Southwestern Bell Corporation, was able to do so. So this merger allowed AT&T to get back into the game of short-distance phone service. For me, the AT&T that we know today, which provides both long-distance and short-distance services. This merger would make AT&T at the time the first or second largest U.S. provider of local long-distance, wireless, and high-speed internet services. AT&T would then go on to acquire Time Warner, now Warner Media. This gave AT&T 15% of the combined company's revenue, and CNN and HBO, which fell under Warner Media. This deal looked good on paper, but landed AT&T in a lot of debt due to them struggling in the media business. AT&T has $180 billion in debt right now. Despite that, AT&T is still the largest telecommunication company and made $122 billion in profit in 2022. They have 183 million subscribers, and out of the top three in the telecommunication industry, T-Mobile, AT&T, and Verizon, AT&T actually charges less per line at $50. So despite having massive debt, AT&T is doing pretty good as an oligopoly in the 21st century. After doing a lot of research for this speech, my last point that I want to make is about the workers. We've talked about the company AT&T from when they were first formed to today to the 21st century. We will now dive into the people that make this company AT&T possible. Telecommunication industry workers make more money per hour, and they are made up a lot more educated and people of color compared to the 60s and 70s. 31% of telecommunication workers today have a college degree compared to 7% having a degree in the 70s, as well as 14% having an advanced degree compared to only 1% in the 70s. 86% of telecommunication workers in the 70s were white compared to 60% today. That means 40% of telecommunication workforce is made up of a diverse people that are not white. Today, telecommunication workers make between $13 and $61 an hour compared to other workers making $10 and $47 an hour. Telecommunication industry workers can make up to $14 more on average compared to regular workers. There are 11 careers in the telecommunication industry according to Indeed, excluding the corporate side. Lowest paying one is customer service representative, making on average $39,000 per year, and the highest paying one is telecommunication engineer, making $94,000 per year. To get into the telecommunication industry, you need at least a high school diploma. You also need a certificate program so you can gain the skills for entry with job. 2 years Associates of Applied Science degree, communications. A 4-year program, telecommunications bachelor's degree. Depending on which one of these educations you have, depends on which job you can get and how much money you will make. It has been truly fascinating researching how AT&T went from a monopoly to an oligopoly and is still thriving. To also get a peek into the telecommunication industry. Today I have shared with you the history before and after AT&T was a monopoly and a look a little bit into the telecommunication industry. Thanks to the government, monopolies are nearly extinct in America. Oligopolies now rule the U.S. economy. The airline industry, the car industry, and the telecommunication industry, to name a few. As much as people complain about little competition because of how hard it is to get into these industries, I am just thankful that there is competition at all. I would not want to have only one airline or one car company here in America. Thank you for listening to me.